An empty canvas. Looks clean, yet incomplete. Like us, it represents potential. But as it is filled, it represents a divine artistry. Starting from the first stroke, layering, blending, reshaping a surface that was once bare. It gives life to something that looked lifeless. It gives flavor to a bland slate. It provides colors of love and forgiveness. It provides textures of mercy and truth. And with the nature of our chaotic lives, some strokes or colors might look like they don't belong. But as you step back, you realize there is one artist that is in control. An artist that paints to flip the culture into something unexpected. A kingdom culture.
All right, well, good morning and welcome to church. My name is Stephen Braswell. So I'm one of the pastors at Florence Baptist Church. I get to have my hand in a lot of different things, get to serve in a lot of different areas. So I'm thankful that Neil had me come out today and be able to hang out with you all a little bit. So we're wrapping up this series on kingdom culture. But before we get going on that, I just want to say a big shout out to Neil and Mike and for how they are investing in this community. So even things like the parade yesterday, so super thankful that they are sending the gospel out in this community, but that's because you all are stepping up and serving as well. So really thankful for that. Thankful for how that you are leaning in, and because you are serving this community, the community is better for it, that the church at Hebron is here. So very thankful for that. So I'm sharing this message today. You know, I find it interesting. Penn State loses, and magically Neil needs somebody to preach for him today. He couldn't go today. So got a text late last night. He was like, man, I'm just kidding. This has been scheduled for a little bit. But hey, I will say this too. Neil's going to hate me for this, but next Sunday is kind of a special day. It's a big day for Neil, okay? A big birthday coming up. So y'all need to give him a hard time. He may or may not have a birthday that starts with a 5 next Sunday. So, yeah. He's glaring at me right now. So anyway, but yes, y'all need to show him some love, and man, just so thankful for his investment here and in this community. So like I said, we are wrapping up kingdom culture today. And just to give you a recap, we are in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus has a lot of different people gathered there, and we've been talking through things like, what does it mean to live when Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit? What does it mean to live a life when Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness? And that's what our lives should be about. And then we looked at salt and light. You know, we're supposed to be a people that are helping preserve any goodness that is a part of our culture. We should be helping preserve that. We should be the light in our community, doing things like the parade that you did yesterday. Let's go and share the gospel with as many people as we can and let them know that there really is some good news. We're going to transition to a Christmas series here next week. And you know, my kids love Christmas, and I love Christmas and all the things, but the reason that Christmas is really awesome is because of the birth of Jesus, that there's the good news has come on the scene, and we should be the light of the world going to tell people about that, right? And so we've been talking about that. We talked about how Jesus is the fulfillment of the law, and then we walked through a lot of different examples that Jesus said, hey, you have heard it said, but I say to you. I know Neil talked about that last week, but this week, Jesus takes a little turn. And he starts to talk about, what does your life look like behind the scenes when nobody is watching, when nobody's around? Because that really is who you are. And Jesus walks through a passage here that we're going to walk through together. So I don't know if there's any bakers or cooks in the room, but I just feel like this is your time to shine, right? This is your season. We just got done with Thanksgiving. You got Christmas. I mean, this is the season where we're pulling out all the secret recipes, right? Every family's got one, right? Grandma's got the recipe that everyone's trying to get their hands on. It's like, no, you can't have the secret ingredient, but this is your time to shine. Now I'll say this, I'm not even sure Grandma knows the real ingredients. If you want to know the truth, I think she has some guidelines, and that's what makes it so good. She just throws this, little that in there, and it always turns out amazing. But when I say a joke about the secret ingredients, what Jesus gets into here in this passage is a not so secret ingredients. He talks about us doing some things in secret, but he says there's some ingredients that you can have behind the scenes in your life that when you put them all together, it comes together into this kingdom culture life. This kingdom culture life that we're trying to live out, we're trying to follow after Jesus. And yes, Sundays are good, and I know y'all just got through with some Sunday night experiences and different things like that, but it's like Monday through Saturday, when you're just kind of living life behind the scenes, there are some ingredients that can be a part of your life that are going to bring you close to God. And so we're going to get into that. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 6. And so you can turn there. That will be on the screen. But again, a reminder, Jesus is kind of on a mountainside, on a hillside. He's in the middle of a sermon, so we're going to pick up in the middle of that. But there's all kind of people gathered there, right? So there's his followers that gathered there. There are some people that are just curious about what's going on. There's probably some Roman soldiers milling about, like, what's this crowd gathered here for? There's Pharisees, teachers of the law. There's all kind of people gathered there, and so this is for everyone. That's the context in which we're going to pick up on today. Matthew chapter 6. We'll read a few verses. I'll explain a few as we go, and we'll get into this. Okay, Jesus says this, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven." And this verse, I promise I won't stop after every phrase or every verse, but this verse sets up the whole context for where Jesus is going over the next few minutes. He's laying this foundation. He's like, okay, I'm starting with this warning. And Jesus gets right at our hearts, right? He says, I know that everyone kind of likes to be seen. Everyone likes for other people to look at them and say, they've got it together. They've got it. Their life is going well. They've got it together. They're looking good. They're acting right. They're doing right. Everything's lining up for them in life. And Jesus knows that our hearts kind of drift toward that. And he says, be careful. Be careful. If you're trying to practice your righteousness just so that other people see you, you're going to be in some bad space. And so Jesus gives a warning and sets the context for everything else that he's about to say here in this passage. "Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you." So there's hypocrites that they walk into the synagogue, into their what we would think of as a church. And when it was time to give, like, they may or may not have had people actually blowing trumpets and those kind of things. It's kind of like our modern day phrase, like, don't blow your own horn, those kind of things. Maybe that's what Jesus is referring to. But he's like, people would come in and make a really big deal. Okay, it's my time to give, right? And they weren't just giving on the app, right? They had coins. And so they would walk up to the front, and like we used to do this in church. I don't know if you've been in church for a long time, where it's like giving time and you walk up to the front and put your offering in, right? But they would take a coin and it was like cha-chink, 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 and they would stand there for a long time, make a big deal, make sure everyone sees that I am doing this. And Jesus is like, beware of doing that. He's like, when you give, make sure that it's done in secret. Make sure you're doing it for the Lord and not so that other people would see you. And then he goes on, he says, when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Again, same deal. These hypocrites would stand up, and the interesting thing was Jesus was actually calling out some people that were in the crowd, so it must have been a little awkward. Everyone knew who it was. But Jesus was saying when they go in, they want to say, "Oh Lord, thank you so much that I am so great and I'm not like these other people." I mean, just make a ridiculous spectacle of themselves. And Jesus was like, when you pray, that's not going to help you. What you need to do is go and spend some time with your Father behind closed doors. And then we're going to skip down to verse 16. Now, if you're in an app or you've got a physical copy and you're not just looking at the screen, you notice I'm skipping a pretty significant part, which is the Lord's Prayer, right? That's one we're probably somewhat familiar with. But I'm going to skip over that today because that passage of Scripture is going to have its own sermon later on. It's got its own thing, okay? So we'll come back to that a few weeks from now. Verse 16 says, "And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. You see a pattern that's taking place here now. This is the third example that Jesus gives, and it's the same thing over and over again. But he said, hey, when you partake in fasting, make sure that you're not like the hypocrites. Make sure that you've got, that face on. Like we're getting to the New Year coming up, and everyone's going to make their resolutions, right? And it's going to be something that's going to make you miserable, right? Like I'm going to try to eat healthier. I'm going to try to go jog or whatever. And it's these people that are slogging around, and it's like, it's my New Year's resolution kind of thing. Just like when you fast, don't look like that. He says, don't try to get praise from others, but do it in secret, and your heavenly Father is going to reward you. What is Jesus saying over and over again? What he's saying is make sure that you are doing things to not be praised by other people, but to be praised by me. And instead of trying to figure out how to impress other people, you need to pay attention to what's going on in your heart, what's going on behind the scenes. And if you're following God the way that you should, and these proper ingredients are going into your life, then God's going to use you in the way that he sees fit. Let him worry about that instead of trying to figure out how to impress other people. I heard this story recently, and it's a little bit of the origin story of Chick-fil-A, right? We all love God's chicken. It's an incredible place to eat, right? So I'm going to ask in a second who's had some this week. But early on, they were like back in the 90s, they were starting to grow, and Chick-fil-A was starting to get some traction. But there was another chicken, like kind of a fast food place that was on the rise as well. Now, this is going to be a throwback for some of you. Some of you aren't going to know what I'm talking about. There was a place called Boston Market. Okay, all right. I remember Boston Market. Okay. And so Chick-fil-A was on the rise, but so was Boston Market. And Boston Market started to move into some different spaces a little more quickly than Chick-fil-A did, different areas of the country. And so there was a board meeting at Chick-fil-A because we got to do something about this, right? Boston Market is beating us to these different spots around the country. We need to figure out if we can get in there faster, what we can do to make sure that we can continue to grow. And so they get in this board meeting, and everyone's shouting their opinions, and it's going on for hours. And Truett Cathy, who's the founder of Chick-fil-A, is just kind of sitting back, and he's listening to all this discussion go on. And finally, after a lot of discussion had taken place, Truett slams his hands down on the table. And everyone gets real quiet, and everyone turns to see what he has to say. He says, I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm doing this for a long time. And what I've learned is, what we need to focus on is how we can be better at what we do. If we can figure out behind the scenes how to make sure our processes are the absolute best, and we treat people the best that we can, if we focus on that stuff, then the growth will take care of itself. So let's focus on our processes and what we're doing and get that down to a science before we try to force our way into these markets that we're not ready for yet. And what he said was this phrase, let's get better before we get bigger. Now, let me ask you this. I want you to raise your hand. If you ate at a Boston Market this week, okay? I don't even know. I think there's still a few around somewhere, but now, raise your hand if you ate at Chick-fil-A this week. Anybody eat at Chick-fil-A this week? Okay. I had one of their products. Okay. There you go. A good number. Not today. It's Sunday. All right. But anyway, everyone's going to want it now for the next 24 hours. So better before bigger. And that's really the principle that Jesus is trying to get across here, right? What's going on behind the scenes? Instead of trying to put your life on display and say, hey, look at me, Jesus is trying to get across here, hey, you work on following me. You work on what's going on behind the scenes. What does your relationship look like with me when nobody's around, nobody's watching? And once that gets to a place where it needs to be, God will put you in places where you need to be. God will put you in conversations that you need to be in. God will take care of the rest. Better before bigger. And that's what Jesus is trying to get across here in this passage. But when we think about the behind the scenes ingredients of your life, here's some things I want you to think about from this passage. Here's the first thing I want you to think about. Don't wear a mask. This is a great first ingredient. If you're wanting to be a part of the kingdom culture and grow up in your faith, be someone that doesn't wear a mask. What does Jesus say over and over and over again? Don't be like the hypocrites. Every time he goes to one of these examples, he leads off with, don't be like the hypocrites. Don't do what they do. And the word that Jesus is using here is the word for the actors of the day. Some of they were just like our culture, right? They had main actors on a main stage, right? This would be like Denzel Washington, right? Anyone see Gladiator 2 recently? Okay, it was pretty good for the sequel. I'll take it, right? I love the Gladiator movies. But this would be like their modern day, like Denzel Washington. They're big actors of the day. This is the word that Jesus was using. And they would get up on the stage, and to display emotion, they would throw a mask on if they were happy, if they were sad, if they were trying to portray whatever it was that they were trying to get across to the crowd. And what Jesus is saying is, don't wear the mask in life when it comes to following after me. Take the mask off. And we all know, here's some problems with wearing the mask in life and being a hypocrite, saying one thing and doing another, right? One of the biggest ones is we know that this turns people away from Jesus, right? We've seen it time and time again. Oh yeah, you're talking all the time. Man, I go to the Church of Hebron and that place is great. I'm going to pray and I love Jesus and He's awesome, right? But then you participate in the same conversations that everybody else does. We're laughing at the same jokes. You're spending your time, your money, your resources, all in the same way as everyone else. And people that don't know Jesus are looking at you and they're like, man, that's like the Jesus person that they say all the time, but man, their life doesn't really look any different than mine. They're kind of going the same places and doing the same things. Jesus is saying, man, don't be someone who is a hypocrite. And then here's the other thing about being a hypocrite that Jesus makes very clear throughout this passage and the passage we looked at last week, right? Is that your religion is not going to save you and it does not impress God, right? If you're someone that's like, man, I'm going to follow all the rules, I'm going to do all the right things, I'm going to check all the right boxes. It's like, what you need is me. Not just following the rules and going through the motions and those kind of things, but if you just constantly are putting on the mask and doing the right thing and all this kind of stuff, you just like your heart can grow really, really cold when you get really good at religion. When you get really good at religion, your heart can actually grow away from me. And what you need is a saving faith in me. That's what Jesus is getting at throughout the whole Sermon on the Mount. What you've been looking for, it's here. It's right here in front of you. What you need is to turn away from your sin and put your faith and trust in me. And when it comes to our hypocrisy, man, it's going to turn people away from Jesus. But also it needs to be a wake-up call, man, that we all need the gospel. And so when it comes to following Jesus, a great way to self-evaluate is, man, asking yourself the question, am I doing this so that other people would see me and think that I'm awesome and I've got it together and are more impressed by me, or am I trying to please my Heavenly Father? Because here's what Jesus gets at. He's like, I understand that you want to be recognized. I understand that you're looking for a reward. And you know what Jesus says? That's actually okay. That's all right. That's actually a little bit of how I've made humans to operate a little bit, is that we're actually seeking after something. Jesus says, but what you need to be seeking after, the reward you need to be seeking after, is to be recognized by me, not to be recognized by others. Because when you do these things and you're trying to follow after me and you're doing it just so that other people would see you, when you get the attaboy or a well done from somebody, Jesus is like, there you go. That was your reward. That's what you were seeking. That's all you're going to get. But when you're coming after me behind the scenes, and when no one's watching, when no one's around, the reward that you're going to seek is a reward from your Heavenly Father. You're going to be able to grow up in your faith a little bit. You're going to come alive in your life. You're going to have meaning in your life. You're actually going to find what you've been searching for, which is me. The first ingredient of living this kingdom culture life is going to be someone who's taken off the mask and say, man, I'm not going to be a hypocrite in what I do. Who I am in public is who I am actually going to be in private. And here's kind of the next ingredient that Jesus moves us to is that we need to be people that develop in the dark. We need to develop behind the scenes. Jesus goes through these things. We need to give. We need to fast. We need to pray. Who we are behind the scenes is who we really are. And so you think about this process. I know everyone, most people in the room have a phone in their pocket, right? And I've got kids, and so that means I have over 100,000 pictures on my camera roll, right? It's ridiculous, right? You can take a picture of anything and everything. But back in the day, and some people still do this just for fun, if you wanted to get an image, you would take a picture, but then it had to go through a process, right? You took the film, and then you had to go into a dark room, and then you had to put it into some chemical, and then you had to hang it up, and you had to wait for some time. And if the process was interrupted, you were never going to see what was on the image. You had to take some time, and eventually you would get to see, okay, was my thumb over the camera, or is this actually a good picture? I don't know, right? Eventually, you got to see what was going on, but it had to go through a process, and that's what Jesus is talking about here. We need to be a people that are developing in the dark, developing behind the scenes, and it's a process that happens. And so let's get into some of the specifics of what Jesus is talking about, right? He says if we want to develop into who he has called us to be, some of the basic building blocks is we need to be a people that give. We need to be a people that give. That's the first thing that Jesus talks about here. And I know some of you maybe you've just been checking out the church for just a little bit or whatever, and you're thinking, okay, I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting. Now the church is going to talk about money. I know the church is always after my money, right? Well, let's just talk about it for a second. Because Jesus, in the New Testament, he talks about money over and over and over again. Jesus talks a lot about money if you just do a brief kind of flip through of the Gospels. And the reason Jesus talks about money a lot is because Jesus is always after our hearts, and Jesus knows who we are. Our hearts are idol-making factories. And Jesus knows that our stuff has a strong grip on our hearts. And so Jesus is like, hey, are you willing to give up the thing that has your heart because you want me more than you want your stuff? And so the question becomes, if Jesus is calling us to give, the question is, how much do we give? And the New Testament is pretty clear about this, right? It's between you and the Lord. This is part of what Jesus is talking about when he says, hey, do these things in secret. Do these things in prayer. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, Jesus says, when it comes to your giving. Jesus says that we should give generously, but it should be a thing that we do, and it's between him and us, and we decide in our hearts what's right and what can we do. Now, you may still say, hey, I'm still not sure about this thing. Again, if you're like, again, the church is just kind of after my money, then here's what I'll say, and I don't want to make Neil nervous too much, but give somewhere else for a while. Right? If your thing is, if the roadblock between you and giving is like, well, the church just wants my money. No, what I'm saying is Jesus wants your heart. And what we're interested in here as a team is for you to grow up in the Lord. And so I would just say start giving somewhere, because the important thing is who has your heart. And Jesus says one of these secret ingredients is that you would be someone who is giving. Give somewhere for a while and see what it does to your heart. Because what are you telling God? Hey, God, you own everything. You own everything that you've given me, and I'm going to be faithful to you with what you have given. Now, I hope that eventually you would start to give here. If you're not already, maybe you start to give somewhere else for a little bit, but that you would see that we are faithful with what we do with your gifts, and that we're trying to push the gospel as far out into the community and the world as we can. But Jesus says if we're going to develop in the dark, we need to be a people that give. He also says you need to be a person that's praying. You need to be a praying person. Now, you think about this. I don't know, have you ever been in a group of people before and someone has the really great idea of asking the group, hey, who wants to pray, right? What happens? Everyone starts to put their head down. Don't make eye contact, right? I don't want to be the one that prays. And then eventually somebody prays and they go in this like 10-minute, super long, eloquent prayer, and you're like, I'm definitely not praying the next time. I can't pray like that guy or that lady, right? But here's the thing about prayer. Prayer is something that God has designed to draw us closer to him. Prayer is simply just talking to God, just like you would to anyone else as far as the conversation goes. And Jesus says, you don't have to be someone that gets up and prays in public and goes on and on and on. He says, go to your home. Go into your closet, to your bathroom. Go somewhere where it's quiet. You can close the door and just talk to me. If you want to grow up in the Lord, start to share with God the things that are on your heart. Start to share with God the fears that you have. Start to share with God the things that you know are in your life that probably don't need to be there, and say, God, I need you to help me clean this up. I need you to help me get this out of there. And I'm just going to tell you this. I'm going to chase this rabbit here for just a second. Dads, you better be praying for your kids. Because I'm telling you, you can just look around for less than 30 seconds in our culture. Our culture is after your kids. And so we can just kind of go through the motions and say, well, they're fed and they're clothed and those kind of things. But I'm telling you, if you want your kids to grow up in the Lord, it's not enough just to drag them to church with you or to just try to teach them some good morals. You need to be praying for your kids behind the scenes. Don't leave that up to mom. That's our jobs as dads, right? To be praying for our kids because, man, I can tell you the schools want them, the culture wants them, the TV wants them. Everything wants our kids. And, man, it's going to take some dads that are going to stand up and pray for their kids. Behind the scenes. So you want to grow up in the Lord, be someone who gives. Be someone who prays. And then we'll get into the one that we probably don't talk about enough. And Jesus says we need to be fasting. When Jesus talks about each one of these areas, Jesus says, when you give, when you pray, and when you fast. It's an assumption from Jesus that if we're growing up in him and growing up in this kingdom culture, That these are just going to be a part of the regular rhythms of our life. And I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that I'm some expert in fasting, because I could definitely get better at this. But fasting was more of a common thing. Let me just, traditionally, fasting is when you kind of take a pause from something that you would normally do in life so that you can focus more on the things of the Lord. Traditionally, this would be food, right? That I'm going to take a pause from food, something that we need to live, right? Something that is very vital to the functioning of our lives. So I'm going to set that aside to show that, God, I actually need you more than I need this daily bread, more than I need this food, right? And so what would your life look like if you would take a pause on something? Maybe it is food. Maybe it is food to say, I'm going to set that aside for a day or two or a week, and I'm going to use that time to spend on the Lord. But what about this? Did anyone get their screen report this morning on their iPhone, right? Don't you love that comes on Sunday morning? That's the best. I got mine when I was standing back there just a few minutes ago, and the hours were more than I would like for it to be. But what if you said, hey, for this week, what I'm going to fast from, what I'm going to set aside is my phone. I'm just going to use it for whatever necessary phone call. I'm going to just use it as a phone, right? Wouldn't that be crazy, right? I'm just going to use it if I need to make a phone call for work or family or whatever. Like, I get that. But other than that, I'm not going to be on my phone for the week. How many hours of your day would that freed up? I'm going to fast from social media. I'm going to fast from TV. I'm not going to turn the TV on this week, right? We don't have to do it, right? The world's going to keep spinning. It's going to keep going. And you know what it's going to do? It's not just fasting so that you can spend more time with the Lord, right? Which it is. It's going to free up more time for you to pray, more time for you to spend time in God's Word, more time to focus on the things of the Lord. But you know what it's also going to do? It's going to free up time for you to be doing the business of God, right? Instead of coming home from work and just turning on the TV or getting on the phone, what if you spent some time with your spouse and really like seeing what God's doing in their life? What if you spent some time with your kids instead of just, hey, let's all just sit and watch TV or be on our phones together or whatever it is that you would be fasting from? It's going to free you up to say, I'm going to spend time doing the things of the Lord. I can tell you, if you're giving, if you're fasting, if you're praying, if you're doing all these things behind the scenes when no one's watching, you are going to be developing in the dark. And the image that's going to start to show up in your life, if these are part of the ingredients of your life, is someone who is growing up in kingdom culture. And I don't know like what your life is like today, and maybe you're happy with things, maybe you're not. But if you're doing these things behind the scenes, I can tell you your daily life is going to start to change. It's going to start to change drastically if this becomes the new pattern of your life. So be someone who is not focused on being a hypocrite so that other people can see. Be someone who's developing in the dark. And then I'll just close with this kind of question, and this really is another ingredient that Jesus is getting at, but it's this question of what really has your heart. What really has your heart? Because throughout the whole Sermon on the Mount and the last week and this week, this is what Jesus is really getting at. What part of your life does God not own yet? Maybe that's another way to ask that question. Because there may be parts of your life where like, God, you can have everything, but you can't have that. You can have everything. God, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to do all this stuff. But there's this one area that I'd really rather you not speak into, and I'd really rather not deal with right now. We all have those parts of our lives. So I've got 5 kids, and my 2 youngest are twin boys, right? They're 4 years old. And so we have a good time kind of putting them to bed at night. It's always like this routine, and usually they're trying to get out of it in some way or another. But, we're brushing teeth, we're going to the bathroom, those kind of things, we're getting on pajamas, and then we try to have some kind of time where we're talking about the Lord. So we'll read a Bible story, we'll pray, we'll kind of do something, and, I love you, yeah, Dad, I love you, and all this stuff, right? But they know that one of the things is, like, they love cars and trucks and all this stuff. And one of the things is they're not supposed to have those kind of in the bed with them, right? Because they'll have a big truck and they're trying to snuggle up with it. And it's like, well, in the middle of the night, like something could break off or whatever. You're going to roll over on your face. Like, I really want you to have some good rest. I really want you to have some good rest tonight. So we're going to take the cars and the trucks away, right? Okay, Dad, yep, we're taking them away. We're going to put them over to the side, right? Well, I know as soon as I walk out of that door, what am I going to hear? Right, their feet run across the floor, and they're going to get the truck, and it's back in the bed, right? And it's like we had just gotten done having this prayer, Dad, I love you, you're the best. And then what do? They're running across the floor, they're picking up the thing, right? Why? Because what really has their heart? It's that car. It's that truck. And I got to have it, right? And what Dad's wanting for them is to have a good night's rest. I know what's best for them. I'm not trying to keep something good for you, right? I'm not trying to keep it from you. I'm actually trying to help you out. But we live life in this way, right? God, you can have everything. God, I love you like this. But man, you can't have my money though. You can't have that piece of it. That's mine, and you don't really need to speak into that area of my life. God, you can have everything, but I'm just not really the praying type. That's not really me. I'm not great at it, and so I can do everything but that. God, you can have everything, but for me to fast or like pause from something, oh man, that's kind of getting into my time. What about this? God, you can have everything. You can have it all, but I'm not forgiving that person. You just don't know what they did to me and how much they hurt me, and I just really can't let go of that. So you can speak into anything, but you can't speak into that area of my life. God, you can have everything. You can have everything, but man, when it's time for me to step up and serve or do something, I'm not getting outside of my comfort zone. I'm not doing that. That's my time, and I'm busy, and I'm not doing that. What part of your life does God not own, right? What does God really have your heart? Because that's what Jesus is after. Man, from the beginning, that's what Jesus has been after. He's been after our hearts. Our hearts grab onto all kind of different things. Jesus says what you really need is me. And those things that you're not letting go of, you're not willing to give over to Him, what's He wanting for us? He's wanting rest for us, for our souls to find rest in Him, for us to have the freedom that we're actually looking for, right? What are the ingredients that you're kind of sprinkling in behind the scenes in your life? Who are you? Who am I when nobody's around and nobody's watching? Because if we want to be a part of this kingdom culture and really grow up in the Lord, Jesus gives a really clear plan here in Matthew chapter 6. And I hope that you'll hold on to that. I want to pray for you, but there's some ways that you could respond today. Maybe you don't have a relationship with the Lord. Maybe you have been going through the motions, and we'd love to talk to you about having a relationship with Jesus today. That's the thing you need more than anything. In fact, that's why God brought you in the room today. I promise you that. He didn't have you come in here so that you could hear about some good morals or hear these guys sing some really good songs. He wanted you to know, hey, you can have a relationship with me, and today's the day. The God, no matter where you're at in life. That's why God brought you in the room today. The other piece is this. There may be something that you're kind of holding back from God, right? There may be a part of your heart that God doesn't own yet. And you know what it is. It's already popped into your mind, into your heart, and you don't really want to deal with it, but God does. God wants to deal with it. And if you'll trust Him with it, what's on the other side of that? It's freedom and it's rest. It's what you're looking for. And so I want to encourage you as I'm praying to talk to Him about that.